to the publication of the Open Meetings Act here in council chambers. If you would please join me in rising for a moment of silence and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Roll call, please, Beth.
Granquist.
Here.
Lange.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
Murin. Jackson.
Here.
Faust.
Here.
File.
With that, I will look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Also, a motion to approve the full agenda.
So moved, Your Honor. Second.
And please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Moving to item 21 on our agenda, special presentations, proclamation for Norfolk High School Panther basketball team 2017 Class A state championship. Whereas the Norfolk High School Panther boys basketball team last won a state title 30 years ago in 1987, and Coach Tony Siskey led the team to a season record of 23-4, and a number of the Panther players have played together since second grade and made a state championship their ultimate goal. And the Norfolk High School Panther boys basketball team played the number 1 seed Papillion La Vista on Saturday, March 11th, 2017 at Pinnacle Bank Arena in Lincoln. And the Norfolk High Panthers achieved their goal of winning the Class A state championship with an impressive victory over Papillion La Vista. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Josh Moaning, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, do hereby congratulate the coaches and players of the Norfolk High School Panther boys basketball team for their 68-49 victory over Papillion La Vista to win the 2017 Class A state championship. I don't know if we have anybody here from the school tonight to receive the proclamation. I don't believe so, but I think anyone who was there, watched the game, or watched the Panthers at all this season will agree these guys know how to play some ball. It was a good thing for the community, a strong outpouring of support from the community, both at the game and coming back home. So proud moment, special moment for the community. We'll move on to item number 22, public hearings and related action. I will open public hearing to consider the Delay Bank Building redevelopment plan. And I think we hear from Andy to tell us about the plan.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this is really the last stop for the redevelopment plan, as we've all seen, for the Delay Bank building downtown. This is a required public hearing that's is required, as state law requires this to happen, so tonight would be it. I see the developers are here, the building owners here, if there's any questions on this plan. And of course, the owners are seeking tax increment financing, which is the purpose of this hearing tonight. So I'd be available for any questions.
Any questions for Andy? No. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing and look for a motion to consider resolution number 2017-17 approving the Delay Bank redevelopment plan.
I'll make the motion, Your Honor. Second that, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'll be abstaining from this vote.
Okay. Any discussion, further discussion on this? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Council member Clausen abstaining. Motion carries.
Okay, moving on, item number 24. I'll open this public hearing at the request of Carla Meisinger, Mark Meisinger, and Amy Reese to consider a zoning change from C1 Local Business District to R2 1 and 2 Family Residential District on property addressed as 604 South 19th Street. And Val, I think you opened the discussion on this.
Thank you. This area is just west of the 18th Street and Paswalk traffic circle. It's a vacant lot north of Associates Insurance, I believe it's called. There is R3 zoning to the north of that, and they want to extend residential down into this vacant lot, and so then need to change from a C1 to their requested R2.
Okay. It is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to comment? Evening, Dick.
Good evening. I'm Dick Johnson with Johnson Engineering and representing the Meisinger family on this requested zoning change. As Val said, this is the vacant lot immediately north of the Insurance Associates building on South 19th Street. Just north of this lot is all single-family attached dwellings for about a block or a little over a block. They have an agreement with the developer to sell them the lot contingent on the zoning, of course. The hope being that 4 total single-family attached units can be put up. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Any questions for Dick?
Dick, it abuts current C1 zoning, correct?
On the south, yes.
Yeah. So the privacy fence requirements are going to be on the back of whom?
That'll be required by the developer, or the developers will have to put the buffering and any screening required in
That's
on the
what
south lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're aware of that.
they're aware of that,
Okay.
yes.
Dick, you said plans for 4 single-family units, is that what you said?
It's 4 units, 2
4
buildings,
units.
basically.
Okay, okay.
That's what we're hoping for.
Any other questions?
So you had said 4, but it could be, I think you mentioned before, maybe 3, but
It could be, yeah,
depending on,
well, if you want the whole terrible truth, I'll tell you.
I love terrible truth.
Bad news.
I drew up a real nice final plat with 4 lots, 2 single-family attached, and woke up at about 2 in the morning one morning, and it dawned on me that we have to have a buffer yard on the south one. So the lot got pulled from the planning commission, and we're taking a look at what we can do to reconfigure that. Worst case scenario, I suppose there'd be 2 single-family attached and maybe a single family.
Okay. Honesty and engineering.
They never go together. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to comment? Seeing none, any other discussion on the council? If not, Planning Commission report, please, Beth.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on March 7, 2017, at the request of Carla Meisinger, Mark Meisinger, and Amy Reese to consider a zoning change from C1 Local Business District to R2 1 and 2 Family Residential District on property addressed at 604 South 19th Street. The Planning Commission recommend approval on a 7-0 vote.
Okay. With that, I will close the public hearing and move to item number 25. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5458, approving a zoning change from C1 to R2 on property addressed as 604 South 19th Street.
Your Honor, I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5458.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion among council? Seeing none, I'd ask you to vote. Oh, short title. Thanks.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, now please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance 5458 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, as there was no voice against it or anything, and it fits in the neighborhood real well, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass this ordinance on second and third reading.
No further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance 5458 carries on second and third.
Item number 26, open the public hearing at the request of John D. and Amber R. Amick to consider zoning change from A, agricultural district to RR, rural residential district on property generally located a half-mile east of 61st Street and Omaha Avenue. And Valerie, will you kick this off for us?
Thank you. This property, like you said, is on West Omaha between 49th and 61st Streets. It's currently zoned ag, and they're requesting a portion of the 240 acres that they own to be zoned RR, so they can do 2 approximate 5-acre lots out there. This is not in conformance with the 2017 comprehensive plan, as the comp plan designates this as agricultural, that recommends a density of 1 dwelling unit per 40 acres. There are 3 property owners within the 300-foot boundary that we have to notice. Mr. Koppel represented them all and wrote a zoning or a opposition letter to the zoning request. So we do have 100% opposition to this zoning change, and that means that per state statute 19-905, if there's over 20% opposition to a zone change from those within the 300 feet, and the requested change is not in conformance with the comp plan, then it requires 6 affirmative votes.
Okay, thank you, Val. This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment, please do so now.
Here I am again.
Twice in 1 evening.
This is for an 11 3/4 acre tract located along Omaha Avenue. The far west line of the proposed zoning change is the west line of the City of Norfolk's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. The 2 5-acre lots would both front on Omaha Avenue. One of them has an existing house and a few outbuildings on it, and the other one is vacant, and the developer would like to, well, he has an agreement to sell the house based on getting it approval by the city. And the other lot, he'd just like to see if he can sell and get somebody to build out there. The one other thing that you should be aware of, and then I'll get out of the way, he owns the land, okay, the 240 acres Val mentioned, first of all, 160 of that is all that's in your zoning jurisdiction. The west of the line west of the west line of this is another 80 acres that the Amicks own that's outside the City of Norfolk's jurisdiction. And they did get approval of 2 lots over there that front on 61st Street. I would point out that with all that, this still meets the density requirements of 1 residence per 40 acres, as Val was discussing. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Questions for Dick?
Are you allowed?
The mayor told me I could.
Oh, okay.
Dick,
Just
one of
one
the things, one of the questions about that, I love the point that you made, the density, the one per 40. Is there anything that, how do we record that going forward? And both as it relates to the property outside the zoning jurisdiction of the city, which may come into the zoning jurisdiction of the city before too long. But how is that designated? So if I come to your client and want to buy some of that adjoining property, how do I know that I can't build a house on it?
Well, let me back up a step. Well, the short answer is, you really don't. However, with me, you know there's a longer answer. The subcommittee of the Planning Commission was concerned about the issue, and Mr. Amick has said all along that once he gets these lots sold, he's done, and he wants to keep the rest for agricultural use. The subcommittee was concerned about that and asked the same question, basically. What they had us do was prepare a preliminary plat of the whole 240 acres, showing the 2 lots that we want to develop now, of course, and then the rest of it, just one big area, I dotted out, and then the legend said, and on the plat, I believe, said to remain agricultural use. So there is at least something on file with the city that wouldn't be filed in the land records, which I think is what you're asking, Clint.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a challenge
Yeah.
to all of us, to see how we can do that, whether it's in
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the plat, on a subdivision agreement.
The other thing that you have that helps a little bit on the density is this is in a wellhead protection area. So, which allows, I believe, 1 septic tank per 10 acres. As far as what I think your question is, though, there wouldn't be anything in the land records. If somebody wanted to buy it or part of it or whatever, they'd either have to buy 20 acres and then could build a house, because 20 acres is the minimum lot size for a residence in the agricultural zoning, or else they'd have to come before the Planning Commission and you guys and try to do the same thing we're doing here. Did I come close to answering, or?
Yeah, I think you would agree with me that it's kind of a challenging,
Yeah.
kind of a challenging thing, so
Yeah.
so that there's adequate notice out there, and in the way that those real estate transactions occur, you might find those things if they're in subdivision agreements or whatever, but if I buy the adjoining, I think it's just an ongoing challenging thing that we're all challenged. If you've got any great ideas to make that better,
Well, my first thought is it wouldn't do any good in the subdivision agreement, because that would be just against the 2 lots that we're trying to plat. So the rest of the 160 acres, there wouldn't be anything filed against that. I don't know a good way to put anything in there. I guess the best safeguards I can offer are the wellhead protection and the fact they'd have to be back in front of the city if they wanted to try to do something different.
Have you considered expanding the subdivision
But what?
to include the space so that you've got in control
Control what? I mean,
the density, so that that person becomes a party to that
Oh.
area becomes a party to the subdivision agreement?
no, not really.
Any other questions for Dave?
More clarification, I guess I don't know if it's for you, Dick, or if it's for Dennis, because we're dividing this up into 2 5-acre lots, is your proposal, correct?
Right.
But, you know that the wellhead protection thing is 1 septic per 10 acres. So
Well, I think,
I'm not real great at math without my calculator, but 5 and 5 is 10, and so,
so there's 2 lots.
yeah,
So,
so.
well, Dennis brought up at the Planning Commission the possibility of putting something in the subdivision agreement that, or on the plat, I'm not sure which yet, designating which 10 acres are being reserved for wellhead protection for each lot, which is probably a good idea from what you're saying, Jim.
But these folks aren't owning it, though.
What's that?
The people with the 2 5-acre lots aren't necessarily owning the other.
No, they wouldn't own it's more of I would envision it as more of an encumbrance or a covenant, if you will, on the remaining land that Mr. Amick owns, that, you know, that basically he's got this 10 acres that has already been spoken for as far as wellhead protection goes. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment as part of the public hearing?
I've done this before, do I have to sign it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sign it.
All right. Just to answer, actually clarify the,
And Dave, just so
Excuse
everybody
me,
tell us who they are. Yeah.
my name is Dave Amick, thank you. Appreciate you taking time to hear this out. Basically, this rule actually states it's not one septic every 10 acres, it's 4 per 40. So you could have 4 septics in a 10-acre plot on a 40 acres, if you want to look at it like that. You don't have to have 10 acres per wellhead. Okay? So that shouldn't even be an issue as far as what you guys are talking about in terms of the septic tanks per se. That doesn't mean you have to split off exactly 10 acres for one septic. It's 4 per 40 acres. That's the way the wellhead protection law reads. And that's what I was told here and from the county, both. And they were very specific about that. So just to further explain my intentions with the property, and I've explained it to the oppositions and those who are opposing this. Essentially, I bought the 240 acres. I sold 2 farms to buy this one because it was closer to my home, far more convenient because I was going over 20 miles to the east to one farm to check cows and 15 miles to the northwest to check cows. And this was on my way to work every day, pretty much. So it was a convenience thing for me. When I bought the property, I was trying to not have to buy the house and the buildings and everything with it, but they preferred to sell it all as one lot. So I was left to deal with that. And it's a house that hadn't been really kept up for the last 14 years since Mr. Krenzine, who I'm sure some of you remember, Alvin Krenzine, passed away. So it's a good opportunity to separate off one of these 5-acre lots with the house and the buildings, so someone would purchase it for upkeep and make it a really nice home, because it is a beautiful home. It just has been pretty much left abandoned the last 14 years or so since he's passed away. So I feel that's a good thing for the community, for the neighbors, for everybody. It's gonna increase the curb appeal of the street itself, and land values too, I think, make things far more valuable. And the other 5 acres that is immediately adjacent to this to the west, I thought, well, I can make one more building lot here. The ground has a lot of trees on it and things for me that doesn't really serve my purpose as well, but it would be a beautiful place to build a home. And quite essentially, just to be very honest with you, the only reason I'm selling any land at all, because if I had plenty of money, I'd keep the whole thing. But I just want to help satisfy the debt on the land, so therefore I've elected to do this. I have zero intention of building anything else on the property, of putting any other homes, selling anything else. In fact, I really don't think it's very well suited for it myself in a lot of places on this land. As a matter of fact, I was just at the NRCS office last week trying to get the 70 acres of farm ground that I have into CRP for a 10-year term. So I think that pretty well tells you I'm not going to build on it. So at any rate, just these 2 lots is all that I'm concerned about, and I'd like your consideration to pass it just so we can move forward, as I do have a purchase agreement signed and ready to go, and we could close as early as next month on the home and 5 acres with the buildings if we get this approved. I have not yet marketed even the other lot for sale at this point. So anybody have any questions?
Questions for Dave?
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to make comment?
Good evening.
Evening.
My name's Dave Koppel, for those of you that don't know me. I'm here this afternoon or evening to represent Don Gartner, Dion Horn, and his wife Kelly. In addition, I have been authorized to indicate to you that Dr. Brian Vonk and his wife Mary Beth, Eldon Peters and his wife Jane, Don Detterman, all asked that my comments be considered their comments as well. And by way of introduction, Don Gartner, Don Horn, Dion and Kelly Horn are the three property owners that are within the 300-foot notice requirement. The other individuals are people who are landowners in and around the property that is the subject of this particular application. On the letter that I had sent to the Planning Commission, and it's my understanding that you have been provided with a copy of it, I attached a copy of the plat map and have shaded that for you just to kind of give you some reference. It's yellow, and the property that's in question is in section 25. Eldon Peters and his wife live immediately to the north of this. Don Denninger has property immediately to the north of it. Mr. Gartner and the Mr. Horn's property is to the south of it. We've also had communications with Jeff Schumacher, who is the son-in-law of Dwayne Ackley, who's now deceased, who is the property owner that is to the west of the property that's in question. And as I said, all of these people have asked me to speak in opposition to this application. The basis for the opposition to the application is really multifaceted. The first objection is health and safety. This area is served by septic tanks. And the second point of concern is that this area, or at least parts of this property, are within the 100-year flood plan. Third area of concern with respect to this property and the application is that it is within the wellhead protection plan. Fourth area of concern is that it does not comply with the 2017 comprehensive plan. As you know, you spent nearly a year trying to get that plan prepared and finalized. And as you know, the city of Norfolk spent nearly $83,000 to $84,000 in having that comprehensive plan prepared so that it could be finalized and approved by the city council. It seems rather ironic and it seems rather inconsistent. And from my client's perspective, it seems like it's not good business practice to spend nearly 12 months doing a comprehensive plan, spending nearly $83,000 of money to do a comprehensive plan, and within about 30 days to be asked to approve a zoning application that is not in compliance with the comprehensive plan. We also have a genuine concern about what I'll describe as incremental creep. And by that, I mean, while Mr. Johnson and Mr. Emick can stand before the council and say that there aren't any further plans for development, I respect that very much. But I also know, as Mr. Shukai was asking and Mr. Johnson responded, is that there really isn't anything of record that anyone would know that there's some kind of limitation or some kind of restriction. Our concern is that they are saying here, we've already got one house, and all we're really doing is asking to have this 10 or 11 acre parcel rezoned so that we can cut that up and have two houses. But unbeknownst to my clients, the applicant also went to Madison County and got zoning approval in order to have two lots on the property that's immediately west of the property that is the subject of the rezoning application. So from my client's perspective, this isn't an increase of one house in the neighborhood. This is an increase of 3 houses in the neighborhood. And that's a 300% increase from what exists right now. My clients have genuine concern about flooding They have genuine concern about water runoff. They have genuine concern about divergence of water from dominant to subservient lands. They've lived out there for years. Mr. Horn has lived out there, I believe, since the 1960s. Mr. Gartner has lived out there since the 1970s. They've seen what this land is like, and this land has waterways that run through a portion of the ground that Mr. and Mrs. Amick have. They have seen standing water, they've seen flooding in those areas, and they have genuine concerns about the flooding, about the standing water, and about the health relative to septic tanks that may be flooded out and what that does from a waste perspective, because they are property to the south and all of that water runs to the south. They are here this evening. I've asked them to share a few comments with you relative to their observations, relative to drainage, relative to water runoff. And so when I conclude, I anticipate that they will speak. To address I also want to make one other point. My understanding from speaking with Mr. Horn is that the water level in this area is 15 feet below ground level. So as you can tell, it's got a very high water level. Mr. Shukai asked Mr. Johnson about, are there ways that we can try to protect this or try to put people on notice in that type of situation? And in this particular rezoning application, there is one way that the city can put people on notice, and that is to vote no for the application. And my clients and the surrounding property owners that I've identified are requesting that you vote no for the rezoning application. And
Any
with
questions for Mr. Cobble?
Do the people that live around there currently have problems with flooding now, that live there now?
I think Mr. Horn can address that specifically. I think Mr. Gartner is prepared to address that. They live on the south, and I think Mr. Peters, Eldon Peters, whose property is to the north, can address that concern as well. And they're all here, and I'll invite them to come up and share a few comments with you and try to answer any questions that they may have since they've seen the flooding. Thank you.
Anyone else wanting to comment as part of the public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Don Gartner, and I do live just south of the proposed rezoning property, and have for 43 years. I have a quarter section there, and I have another 80 acres over to the west of there. I got about a mile of the Elkhorn River there. So I'm just across the street on West Omaha Avenue there. Anyway, myself and the adjoining neighbors have firsthand account of runoff water that basically collects on the Ackley property and then goes under a couple culverts under 61st Street onto the Amick property and comes across there and ultimately goes across under West Omaha Avenue onto my property, on over to Don Horn's property, and on down to the river. And a 3-inch rain has that knee-deep in water. A few years ago, they say it'll never happen again, but it was that deep going through there. And it's that water's got to go somewhere. And like I said, it pretty well starts with the Ackley property. And talking to Jeff Schumacher the other day, he said, I have concerns about any water restrictions. It's going to hold up the water there. In fact, this winter and spring, they have done contoured the land there to get it to run off a little bit better. So anyway, between the Ackley group and Dr. Brian Vonk, who could not be here tonight, radiologist here in Norfolk and down at UNMC, and he's working down in Omaha right now, but he strongly opposes this situation. And like I said, they've been contouring the field, and so one of the biggest concerns is the water runoff. The water's got to go somewhere. And we also have concerns with the additional, all the additional domestic wells and septic tanks, which will be located just about a long 3-iron away from all of Norfolk's drinking water, all the city wells. And you would think that that might come into a little bit of factor there. Again, it seems like the wellhead protection area is a real gray area. I've talked to the NRCS people, and they, yeah, it's a different situation for every different everybody's plan, so it's been a little bit gray on that. But with that, again, I would just ask that we're opposed to the rezoning.
Any questions, Mr. Gardner?
So that water that runs off of the Ackley, does that follow like an old creek bed?
It just gathers, whether it comes from the hills up north, I don't know, but it winds up being a huge lake there, and so they're getting it diverted out of there.
It becomes a lake on Ackley?
It does. Which ultimately goes through a couple of culverts onto the Amick property and across there and onto mine and onto Horns and on into the Elkhorn River.
Do you currently have a septic tank?
I do have a septic tank, yes. Yep, I've had it there for about 18 years, I guess, yep.
Have you had any problem with it?
I have not had any problem with that septic tank, no, but I had Kenny Porter and Ganskow come in and build way up, so I'm well above all the needed elevations.
If I'm looking at this correct, then that, in that plot it says 25 there. The land that they're talking about is on the north edge of that? And the water comes through the south end?
It does, yeah, it comes, yeah. From that corner of 61st Street and West Omaha Avenue, about 50 yards north of there, there's an area, there's a couple different right there where it comes through. Yep.
And you have how many acres there?
I've got 160 there, I've got a quarter. Yep.
Okay, and do you, is that pasture land for you? You have cattle on it? Or
I have
what do you-
100 acres tillable, and the rest of it is all river timber.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Gardner? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Eldon Peters, and I live on South 61st Street, and I got about 15 acres there that joins the property along the north side. I just have an acreage out there. We lived out there since '82. I guess probably the concern I have is the drainage, to be sure that we continue to run the water properly, and Mr. Amick says that's the plan. I was surprised to hear the 2 lots south of me already are approved. When Dave told me he was going to develop the property, I guess I didn't think it would happen. And then all of a sudden they're done. And there's definitely going to have to be a lot of work to take the water across the road and southeast to the river. And not only does it come off of Ackley's property, Dwayne Freidenberg has a quarter across from me. All that water got to come down that west ditch. The county cleaned that out about 10, 12 years ago. And they'll have to do it again if people keep dumping their trash out there. But anyway, it's got to go under the road there in the southeast. That's the only way it can get out of there. Otherwise, it's just going to come across the road and head east, I guess. So I guess that's my main concern, and I can see why the people down further would be quite concerned about the water. I also was of the impression that somebody asked me about if I'd sell off a little land for development. I didn't think there was gonna be any more septic tanks out there in the wellhead protection. I just remember when somebody was trying to build a commercial business there by the radio tower, I think the biggest objection to it was no more septic tanks. So that surprised me to hear that too. So I'm opposed to any more lots out there than, I guess, the two that are there now are already approved by the county.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Don Horn. Since 1961, I've lived on a 40-acre farm across the road and to the southeast of the proposed building site. I'm really not opposed to the current building site across the road and having that sold off. My opposition is to allow more building sites on the property east. Since I've lived there, for over 56 years, I think I have a pretty good idea of the flooding, the groundwater supply. I had to put in a new well on my property when the city put in their big well. And I'm concerned about the natural waterway that runs down through there. If you look on a Google map, you will see a little blue line that runs down through from the Ackley property, through the Amick property, through Gardner's property, through my property. It's a natural waterway. I don't know how they could fill that in or think that culverts are going to take care of that. Many times over the last 50 years, and I wish I had some pictures, that whole area was underwater, especially in the flood of 2011, I think, when that big flood came through. The water actually is running over the road like this deep on 61st Street and Omaha Avenue. My whole property was underwater. All of the proposed area was underwater. I was really surprised that the county could approve 2 5-acre lots, which I know you have no jurisdiction over, but that was a total surprise to me. So one of my questions, and I think it might have been asked, is how many houses can you build on 20 acres or 40 acres? What is it, 20 or 40? Now I'm hearing that, no, you don't have to build it on 20 acres. You can build it on 5 acres, but you have 40 acres, back over here that you're farming that counts against that. I'm confused on that. You know, I guess I just don't quite understand how that, you can have a 5-acre lot, but the rule says you have to have a 20-acre lot. What's the deal, you know? I know Mr. Amick has said that he has no intention of building any more than the one house, but then all of a sudden we find there's 2 more lots out of your jurisdiction in the county jurisdiction that he's already got approved. You know, I have no intention of selling my 40 acres, but in a year or 2 or 3, I could change my mind. So those are just words. They actually mean nothing. My point to all of this is, you know, if there's 3 lots with septic tanks and wells, and pretty soon, like Mr. Koppel said, pretty soon maybe there'll be 2 more and 2 more and 2 more. And my concern is when it floods, the septic tanks and wells, the contaminated water comes right onto my property. And, you know, if it was the one house, I'm not so concerned about. But I guess if they approve one house, what's going to stop them from 2 or 3 years approving 2 more, you know, on down the line? And I guess that's why I'm opposed to this rezoning. Is there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horn.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment?
Sorry for taking up so much time on this issue. He's absolutely right. I could change my mind tomorrow, but I'm not going to. That's not the point. And if I did, if I take one step further, as we've discussed with the city already, if I would take one step further and even want to put 1 more lot anywhere, I would have to go through and spend tens of thousands of dollars, have to get topography studies, have to get all this stuff done. I don't want to do it. So whether that's really a moot point, because I have to come back here and get anything approved if, and you guys could say no at that point, you know. Let's kind of reflect on what they've all said. I appreciate their concerns, and I understand I'm a country guy. I live in the country too, and I wouldn't want a bunch of houses across from me, you know, a whole subdivision. That's not what we're looking at here. And the bottom line is, if they wanted to protect this property, it was for sale, any one of them could have bought it, you know? They could buy one of my lots. Interestingly enough, one of the people who was opposed, Mr. Horn's daughter-in-law and son, actually approached me interested in buying one of the lots when I'd even mentioned it earlier this year, or last year, I should say. But that's, again, neither here nor there. The bottom line is, they have concerns that are a bunch of what-ifs. None of them are engineers. None of them are hydrology experts. There are plenty of high spots, and I know Dick Johnson can testify to this. There's plenty of high spots to build homes in this. Yes, there's a natural waterway. No, it's not going to be blocked. It can't be blocked. It cannot be blocked. It's in a designated floodplain. Now, if you guys know the rules of that, you can't block the water in there. You can't build anything on it. You can't put a septic tank that's going to drain into it. Interestingly enough, they all have houses right by this property that they've all, you know, separated off acres to build a house on and have all put a well and a septic in. No further away than where I'm at, right? There is a house with a septic and a well in it right now on property, one of the 5-acre lots in question here, that's been there for a long time, and it's fine. It has a basement in it, a nice big deep basement, even in the flood of 2010. It didn't even have water in the basement. Yes, there was a lot of water flowing through there. It's a 100-year flood. Things happen, you know, but we're asking a lot of what-ifs here. And the drainage issue, I appreciate the concern on that. I've got problems at my house I have over by Battle Creek. Somebody decided to plumb in some drainage out of a field, and now I've got water backing all the way up my driveway all summer long. I understand, but we can't, I think it's just literally impossible for a well, or a septic, I should say, that's put up on high ground and leaches away from a floodplain to infest any water flowing through whatsoever. How is that possible? And I just think a lot of the questions and concerns they have are a little over the top and without merit and without any basis or study that can prove any of that. Anybody that builds is going to have to do it right, and it is not going to build inside a floodplain, right? There's plenty of high spots to build on and beautiful places to build a house that are not through this said waterway. That's a bit of a concern. You know, bottom line is, I bought this property. He had a couple of developers approach him to buy it, and he would prefer to sell it to someone who was not going to develop a subdivision. Yes, I'm selling off a few lots for financial reasons only, but it's pure agricultural for me. And if you go out, you can see the hay being cut and the cows grazing grass. So I feel I'm being actually a good neighbor and taking care of the land and cleaning it up after it had been literally abandoned for the last 14 to 15 years. And I'm trying to be a good neighbor to everybody and do the best we can to make this work out. I'll remind you that Planning and Zoning did pass unanimously 7-0 vote to move forward on this. They saw no concerns with what we were doing, and I feel that that should be taken into consideration here and passed as well. So, thank you very much. If you have any more questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Dave.
I'd like to respond to a few of the comments that Mr. Koffel made. I think I've forgotten a couple, but irregardless. First of all, his concern raised about the wellhead protection, I think we've discussed that. We all agree that you can have 4 per 40. We won't be violating anything on the wellhead protection. We'll be complying with all the city ordinances that are required. The floodplain's a lot the same way. FEMA, the Nebraska Department of Natural Resources, and this city council, not necessarily you guys, but your predecessors, have all passed laws and regulations and ordinances regarding the 100-year flood, saying that basically that's the acceptable factor of safety. You have to build your house a foot above the 100-year floodplain in order to be able to qualify for flood insurance and for the whole city to get a lower rate on the flood insurance. If the city allowed people to just go out and build in the floodplain and not worry about height and any of that thing, there's a disaster. FEMA's going to come in and say, well, thanks for playing, but we're not giving you a dime because you didn't follow the rules. So again, you've got an ordinance in place. The flood in 2010 was probably at least a 250-year flood, but we think that if we follow the laws relating to the 100-year floodplain, that's all we can really do. And like I said before, that's been determined to be an acceptable risk. I suspect that quite a bit of the property that's been discussed adjoining it is also in the 100-year floodplain. As far as the comprehensive plan goes, Val told you that the density was 1 per 40 acres. According to the comprehensive plan now, I would submit to you that we aren't going to be violating that if this zoning is passed. Now, I'm not saying we aren't in compliance with the comprehensive plan, but I'm saying that with the 2 more houses, or with the 2 lots, we've still got plenty of land out there. The density is going to be well below the 1 per 40 acres. The other thing that comes to mind on the comprehensive plan, this area is clear at the west end of the city's zoning jurisdiction. theoretically, it's gonna be some of the last to develop. Excuse me. And basically what they're saying is they don't think that residential or whatever will get out to this area in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, however long the comp plan is good for. I would ask you to consider that maybe down the road, the next time they do a comp plan, they might be out closer, and that this would be probably something of a large lot subdivision in the comp plan rather than agricultural. What were the other comments that Dave had? Anybody remember? Okay. You forgot too? Oh, okay. With that, I'll throw it open to any other questions.
Any questions?
Oh, one other comment. The blue line on the map that the gentleman referred to, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times indicates a waterway that's, that the Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction over. Regardless of whether that's there or not, a downstream landowner can't block the drainage way. And along with that, they can't add runoff to it. So, you know, this is something that would be reviewed on an individual site plan basis, in my opinion. But that's all I have right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dick. We remain in public hearing. Any other comments? Seeing none.
I got just one. So basically, if you're in a wellhead protection area, you are almost offered more protection from high density than any other area as far as lot subdivisions go. Wouldn't that be a correct statement?
Well, your highest,
Density would be 10,
no, your highest density protection that we have in our code right now is agricultural zoning, which is
Sure.
one lot per 20 acres.
Mhm.
Then you get into the wellhead protection, and it says you can have a maximum of 4 septic tanks per quarter section
Sure.
of land. So it's not, you can't take the 240 and squeeze them all into one corner.
Mhm.
It's on a 40 by 40 basis, you can do.
for 40 acre. Yeah,
Right.
kind of like we've been talking about.
So, irregardless, I think that of the outcome of the zoning, I think that we still need to have some more discussion about how we get that notification to the public, and would request that whatever action, that it would only be on first reading this evening. Notification on, you've got 5 acres, how many can you have on the balance of the 40 needs to be reflected in some type of document that the public will see.
Dennis, when we first started our well protection, we had a problem in downtown Norfolk. We started our new plan out there. How many wells are close to this land?
Well, we've got 7 wells in the West Well Field, and the wellhead protection area was, developed off of the expected water travel plans on a 20-year basis coming into that well field. And it's based off of where the wells are, what you're producing out of them. So there's 7 wells in the West Well Field, and it's a 20-year time of travel that identifies the wellhead protection area.
Okay, thank you.
My point was kind of getting to the point that because it's a well protection agent or area, it'd be pretty hard for this to ever become a very densely populated area, correct?
Would require utilities.
Yeah, you'd have to, exactly.
Right.
Which,
And
that's not gonna mean, that won't happen in the next. We won't be able to see it. Maybe, yeah.
Any other discussion among the council? If not, planning commission report, please, Beth.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on March 7, 2017, at the request of John D. and Amber R. Amick to consider a zoning change from A, agricultural, to RR, rural residential, on property generally located 1/2 mile east of 61st Street and Omaha Avenue. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the request on a 7-0 vote.
Okay, well, with that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 27, consideration of ordinance number 5459, approving a zoning change from A, agricultural district to RR, rural residential district, on property generally located 1/2 mile east of 61st Street and Omaha Avenue.
Your Honor, I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5459.
Second.
Any further discussion among council?
A question more for Val. I see the planning commission report came back on March 7th, but we had adopted the comprehensive plan.
February 22nd, I think, the second council meeting in February, yes.
So was that introduced in, I wasn't at the hearing, so was it introduced, the conflict with it, or apparently there's a conflict with it?
Yeah, because the comp plan says agricultural designation, and they're actually asking for rural residential. I believe it came up somewhat, but not in the detail that it did tonight, just because the sixth vote really is council and not at Planishen.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, council, please vote.
Voting in favor of ordinance 5459, council members Granquist, Merrill, Jackson, File. Voting against the ordinance, Councilman Lange and Councilman Faust. Motion fails.
And again, even though it was a 5-2 vote, given the opposition, this would have required 6 votes to move forward. So we move on to our regular agenda. Item number 28, consideration of ordinance number 5460, amending section 24-164 of the city code to restrict parking on the east side of East Knowles Street from the beginning of the curve on the southeast corner where East Knowles Street and East Sycamore Avenue meet, north to where East Knowles Street becomes East Sycamore Avenue, and on the south side of East Sycamore Avenue from 40 feet east of the end of the curve on the southeast corner of where East Sycamore Avenue and East Knowles Street meet, west to where East Sycamore Avenue becomes East Knowles Street. Everybody got that? Captain Miller, I think we'll ask you to put that into plain English. Oh, and before that, technically we need a motion. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to introduce ordinance 5460 on first reading.
Second?
Okay, thank you. Captain Miller, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This parking area, we struggled with a good way to describe that. As you can see, it's not easy. The area that we're referring to is a neighborhood east of North Victory Road, and at East Knowles Avenue is a north-south street, and as you go to the north, it curves and turns into East Sycamore. There should be a map in each of your packets for reference. This is a 31-foot wide roadway where parking is currently allowed on both sides of the street. Early in the year, the city police department received 4 complaints from residents in that neighborhood, none of them being on the curve. They were all within that neighborhood. It's a fairly large neighborhood that's continuing to expand. There's a lot of construction that's continuing to develop, and so it's only going to get bigger and busier in that neighborhood. There's currently 2 entrances into that neighborhood. This is on the north end, and that's also where a lot of the development is developing to the northeast of that existing neighborhood. So we can expect that as the developments continue, we're only going to get busier. After we received the complaint, did a traffic count. We have an instrument I can bolt to a pole, and it counts cars going through. And in a 1-week period, we had 3,000 cars go through that curve, the majority of them being expected times of 7 to 8 a.m., noon to 1, and 5 to 6 p.m., where people are coming and going to work. I also to have some pictures of cars as they come through with a 30-foot wide street. Technically, if it was a straight roadway, cars could meet and pass, but because it's on a curve, with cars parking on both sides, it creates a blind spot. So as the cars are trying to make that turn, and as cars are approaching, it creates a hazard, and while it's technically possible, it's not suggested. There's also a lot of children in this neighborhood, and that was one of the expressed concerns, as kids riding their bikes around that curve. Car comes around the corner, they don't see them, and then we could have an accident. I pulled the accident records, and over the last 10 years, we have not had any accidents at that intersection. I believe one gentleman lost a mailbox in slippery conditions. But I don't want to wait until we have an accident before we address the concern. I am proposing that we remove, excuse me, I'm proposing that we would remove parking on the inside edge of the curve, which would allow the vision obstruction to be eliminated, and cars could see you coming and going. It would also give a wider roadway for people to pass in that roadway. I sent out letters to the 5 residences that are immediately affected. I heard directly back from 2 of them. Neither one expressed, or they both seemed to understand that there is a concern there, but they had differing opinions on which side parking should be removed from. One of them agreed it should be taken off the inside curve. The other one wanted it removed off of the outside curve for the main reason of being parking concerns. Because there's driveways along the outside edge of the curve, there's a reduced number of parking spaces available. If they parked it completely full, you could get 5 to 6 cars. It's tight, but you can legally fit 5 to 6 cars on the outside edge of the curve between the parking stalls. Now, if it's parked completely full, the mailman's not going to be happy because it could create some issues trying to get to some of the mailboxes. On the inside edge of the curve that I'm proposing, the area that we are proposing taking the parking off is a 130-foot stretch. With that, you could get 6 to 7 cars if you parked them tight and allowed space for other cars to get out. About 20 feet is what you need for a car to park and have room to pull out from the parking area. So you have a net loss of 1 parking spot, approximately. Now, it depends on the size of the car. Are you dealing small car or a large pickup? You know, they all come into factors. So with that being said, we believe that there is a significant safety concern by allowing parking on both sides of the street. We're proposing taking it off the inside edge of the curve to open up the vision so that people can see cars coming as they're approaching and also give more space for that roadway. Any questions?
You have similar situations in neighborhoods around that are like this?
We've had some complaints, but they don't seem to be as large of a neighborhood as this one is. This is the first one that I'm aware of where we would be removing parking in a residential neighborhood on a curve. We've received other complaints, but they're not deemed as serious or as substantial as this one. Now, we may be setting a precedent by doing this. You know, that's something that we have to evaluate. But this is definitely a concern in a residential neighborhood as it continues to grow.
And for the vehicles around that curve, I guess it sounds like they're there most of the time, all the time, and are they the residents of those?
It appears to be the residences, and there is generally some cars parked there most of the time.
Any further questions? Captain Miller?
No? Thank you.
Sir. Seemingly a reasonable safety measure in a large and growing neighborhood. If no other discussion among the council, short title, Beth?
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 24-164 of the official city code to prohibit parking around the curb beginning on the east side of East Knowles Street to where it becomes to where it becomes the south side of East Sycamore Avenue, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
All right. Even though it's not a public hearing, it is permissible for anyone who wishes to come address this issue to come forward. So at this point, I'd welcome you to do that.
My name's Jerry Hunter, and I live at 1005 East Knowles. That's the first house on the curve. And I've talked to the chief about this problem, and I'd like to state that I am opposed to restrictions on either side of the street. But if we are gonna have a restriction, I would much prefer it to be on the east side of the street. There are far more parking places. I know what he counted, what he said he counted. I know what fits there because I've lived there 15 years. There is not enough parking places if you restrict parking on the east side of the street.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Adam Sabatka. I live at 1007 East Knowles, which is right at the outside curve of that the intersection in question. The thing about what the captain is addressing there is telling us that we should do is to take the no parking off the inside of the curve, which leaves the parking on the outside. There's several driveways along the outside edge of that. And I see it being more of a problem to put all the cars on that side, because there's 4 or 5 driveways trying to back out of that side. You're going to have more traffic or more cars parked there. For the people backing out onto that street, it's going to be more difficult to do that. I'm opposed. I would like to keep parking on both sides of that street, and if we can't do that, I would like to switch it to the other side, because it'd allow more parking, and it would be not as big of a stress on all of the driveways on the other side. I've got small children there too, and it would be the visibility of them coming out of my driveway. You know, if they happen to ride their bike down onto the street or something, there was a lot more driveways affected on the other side. So people would see them easier coming off of the driveways if there wasn't cars parked on that side versus the other side. So if we have to do something, that's what I would prefer to do.
So you're saying you would prefer it on the west side, to be restricted on the west side?
If we have to do something, I don't really want to do either one, because I think it's going to take away a lot of our parking. Directly in front of my house, there's one spot maybe to park, because I have a mailbox, and then I'd have to crowd Jerry's driveway to park there. It's not an issue for me right at the moment until I have people come over, or I have my children get big enough to drive, and then I have nowhere to go for them. So, but yeah, that would be the case. I would rather restrict the parking on the other side of the street. Then if we can park on the other side, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Hello, my name's Crystal Von Campen, and I live at 1401 East Sycamore. I'm opposed to restricting parking on either side of the street. As I speak right now, my family is gathered at my house, as we do every Monday night, for family dinner. There will be 13 people there. So restricting parking everywhere doesn't help us out a whole lot. We do have a majority of the cars parked on that street. The photo that's in one of the whole packets shows a white pickup truck parked on that, I believe is what you're calling the inside curve. Nobody parks on that curve because it's not, wise. But if you continue moving that parking forward in there, further up the street, it hinders us especially. And if we move it to the inside on our side of the street, it's going to hinder us some more. The big issue, in my opinion, is not the parking, it's the fact that people fly through that curve. If anything, the parking there slows them down. They fly through there. And I understand that there is only 2 entrances to that neighborhood, but it doesn't stop people from, going crazy down that road. I understand too that the complaints were maybe not from the people who live on the curve. There's a lot of construction in and out of there. Somebody stated they're building new houses down on the end of those lots. But the big problem, in my opinion, is not the parking on the curve. It's the people that have no respect for speed limits or anything else like that. I would oppose that parking because, like I said, unless there's a party in the neighborhood, or like Adam just moved into the neighborhood, so there were a lot of cars there, which is probably about the time that this complaint came up. But he doesn't even park one of his vehicles at his house for this reason. So, you know, restricting that parking is just, it doesn't work for a lot of us in that neighborhood. You know, especially because Adam's house, my house, and Jerry's house all are right there, and everybody else is on the straightaways. And, you know, so I would hate to see it get restricted. The hope is that when they do get the rest of those lots in, there will be a road onto Benjamin, maybe, down on that east, you know, in the north, that there would be a road in and out of the neighborhood, because there are a lot of people in that neighborhood, and there's a lot of young teenagers in that neighborhood. And so losing our parking spaces doesn't help any of us out. So thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Captain Miller, are speed bumps allowed in residential neighborhoods like that?
We don't have any speed bumps in town at all.
I didn't think we did. I just wasn't sure what the ordinance would say.
We don't have any, and the big reasons is the plows and stuff don't like them because they're not getting trucked up trying to move snow.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Carla Morris, Swankampen. I also live at 1401 East Sycamore. So the restriction of the parking on there for us, our home is a 5-bedroom home, which is full. And as you know, it's a 2-car garage with 2 cars in the driveway. So if each person in our home has a vehicle, there isn't a place, or anybody who would buy this home after us, there isn't a place for 5 vehicles to park in the driveway. So restricting parking on one side of the street, I'm curious as to what that's going to do to property value for the people who live there on the curve, because now you've taken away any ability for anybody to park on the street or one side of the street. As Crystal had stated, they fly through the neighborhood. So a lot of times the people that are flying through have to slow down to come around the curve because the cars are parked there. The other thing that I question is, I don't know any other area in town where there's a curve or a 30-foot wide street where we've restricted parking on both sides or one side of it. If you head down in the older sections, the streets are narrower and you can park on both sides. But I don't see any neighborhood here, like on 1st Street, 2nd Street, 4th Street, any of those in the residential areas complaining about parking on both sides of the street when only one car can pass, when we have a 30-foot wide street. As the police captain stated, you can pass 2 cars there. It might not be suggested, but you can pass 2 cars with 2 cars parked, one on either side of the street. Restricting parking in this area makes it difficult for all of us who live on the curve because we don't have anywhere else to park. It's not like we have a parking lot just down the street from us. The side of the street that they're talking about restricting parking on is a good portion of where the parking is. The other portion is, as we're all backing out of our driveways, we have to watch for the small children, but we're supposed to inhibit our parking abilities so that other people can drive 60 miles an hour around our curve and not have to watch for the small children that are out there playing. So if we're really gonna look at this and we have a traffic camera up counting the number of cars coming through, do we have a traffic camera up counting the speed of the cars that are coming through there? Do we know, there's been no accidents in 10 years, so luckily no children have stepped off the street, because when you're doing 60 around the curve there, which they do, squawking tires on 2 wheels, it's gonna be a little hard to stop for any child, whether or not we're parked on either side of the street or not. So my question is, if we're going to restrict parking, how many other areas in town are we gonna restrict parking on in housing developments? you know, we've purchased this house, but if we ever decide to sell it, I'm gonna have to explain to the next family that wants to have 5 children, I'm sorry, but you're only gonna be able to have 4 vehicles, because that's the way it works in this neighborhood. And there's no other place in this neighborhood that has restricted parking, so, you know, like I said, I'm fairly concerned as to what it's gonna do to the property values of the 3 homes that sit on the curve, so, do you have any questions?
I got a couple, Carla. And it sounds like, if I'm getting this right, I'm just looking at the picture, that you're in the White House.
Yep.
One of you is in the one that, I don't recall your name, in the blue. You live right next door to them. And then the other one live across the street.
No,
You're all on that same curve.
Gary lives in the first
So-
house that approaches it, and then Adam lives in the yellow one, and then we live in the white one.
Okay, okay. So do the neighbors discuss with you guys on parking or issues with the cars? 'Cause it seems like they're all coming from the White House. At least in
No.
this picture, there's 4 of them outside. That's why I say that.
Yeah.
Of
we've
where,
never-
you know, on the
we've never
curb.
had
and
any neighbors complain
Nobody's
anything about
talked to
the
you guys
parking.
and trying to work it out or anything.
When Adam moved in, he had his truck parked on the curb because they were moving in and stuff, and we had said, you know, that's not the best place to park, because it's hard to see coming around the curb, but otherwise, we've never had any neighbors say anything to us. That's why we were a little surprised when we got the letter. So nobody in the direct area of us have ever said anything about, the parking on the street there, so.
Okay. All right.
Anything else? Okay.
Captain Miller?
Yes.
You'd referenced the traffic counts
Yes.
in that area. Did you do speed calculations as well?
The instrument does do speed calculations, but because it's on a curve, I can't get an accurate speed. I could do it on any of the straightaways, but it's a radar, so it calculates it coming straight on. The position of the poles where I would put it on are too close to the curve to get a speed. I can get a speed coming into it, and I can get a speed going out of it, but my intent at this time was to get a count on the curve, because there's other streets where people could have turned off of.
Would it be reasonable to expect, if you were to do a speed study on the straightaways leading into and going out of the curve? So if, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm heading for this curve, and I'm doing X amount of miles an hour, I will slow down and go around that curve.
Right, absolutely.
So would it be reasonable to assume we could figure out what the speeds would be in that neighborhood prior to them entering or
Yes,
the
I could
curve
figure
from
out,
either
I
direction?
could go, yeah, I can get speeds coming out of the curve going either direction.
All right, all right. How long would it take to do that study?
I usually try to do a week at a time.
Okay.
So if I'm gonna do 2 different directions, I'd have to do it twice.
I see.
So 2 weeks at least,
Okay,
plus some time to recharge batteries and that type of thing.
sure. All right, thank you.
I got a couple more for you.
Yes.
And I don't disagree, obviously, I live in that neighborhood, and anything that's going east, I don't know that they go 60 around the curve, but anything that's going east, obviously, I think we've all seen that live in that neighborhood, that there is vehicles that go tremendously fast down
Sure.
there. As in any neighborhood, they might have some teenagers, it seems like, but, what was the complaints, I guess, like? Was there multiples? I'm just trying to get an understanding of how this came about, I
Sure.
guess, of this complaint.
If you're familiar with the eGov website that the city has, it's a place for the citizens to submit complaints. And we received 4 complaints within a week to a week and a half time frame from 4 different residences, none of them being the people who live on that curve. They were all, I looked up the names and the phone numbers, and they're spotted throughout that northeast part of where this situation is. They came in, they reported concerns about blind spots around the corner, concerns for trying to, you come in there and you meet a vehicle and then you have to slow way down to get through there real slow. Concerns for children on bicycles coming through there and having a car come through there and cause an injury. Like I said, we haven't had the injuries, but I don't want to wait until we do. But they were all similarly worded complaints on tight passing and safety concerns for both vehicles and children. Because if anyone who knows that neighborhood, it's very densely populated with children.
Captain, we've discussed in other areas restricting parking on one side of the street and how that affects traffic speeds. When that typically happens, do you see speeds increase?
I don't have any, I can't comment to that because I don't have any specific examples to allude to. I will say, you know, some of the examples that they referred to some of the older neighborhoods where they're narrow streets, that's true, but they're straight streets. And so when you're meeting somebody straight on, it's easier to see them. When you have a curve and you have cars parked, there's a blind spot and you can't see around that curve until you're around those vehicles.
Other question?
I just, one question. I'm looking at the map, or the layout of the lots there, and when you come around East Sycamore Avenue, would it be, I mean, as a compromise, would it be, could the person eliminate just a few on the immediate curve? And then once you get through the curve, you know, if you're driving, would that open up?
The way we identify that is sight triangles. You know, if there's cars parked in there, you know, you want to be able to see cars coming. And if you have certain cars parked in there, you know, anything would be an improvement.
Sure.
But if we're going to do it, you know, we went from the start of the curve till 40 foot past the curve on the, would be the south edge of East Sycamore. It's kind of hard to explain. It's on a curve. You got all these two different streets intersecting in a curve, so it's kind of hard to explain. And the reason that I picked that point of 40 foot was that that is within the driveway to the north, and there would be no cars parked on the north edge, so people could see, get a clear vision obstruction for, or a clear field of view for traffic coming from the east as they're coming around the corner. If that made sense.
Any other questions? Thank you, Captain Moon.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to address this matter? And I apologize again before that I didn't open it up to discussion. Anyone else? Discussion among the council?
I guess the biggest thing that concerns me, again, is the tightness and the visibility, or the sight lines that disappear when we have parking there. Now, I guess what concerns me the most is probably the extent that we're doing it to, and then the other, I guess I'd like some of that feedback on what the speed actually is coming in and out of there, and a possible alternative. Yeah, we haven't done speed bumps, but I will tell you, I go visit people where they do speed bumps quite often, and they get snow there too.
Yes, they do.
And, you know, they are marked, so you physically know when there's snow there, that there's a speed bump there too. So, and, so I would hate to simply rule that out too, just because we haven't done it, or because it affects the snow removal, which I think in our last count right now is 7 times since the season started. I've got to look at my calendar, but I have been keeping it this year, so it was one of those you know, it's going to be so bad, and it really isn't. So
There is.
It's the speed study thing that kind of gets me a little bit. I'm wondering if we couldn't table this in favor of a speed study. I think Captain Miller referred to take a couple of weeks, getting it both directions. It might give us a little bit of time to talk about, as Councilman Lange said, talk about speed bumps. I too go to other communities where they're very, very effective in high-density residential areas and controlling speed. Controlling speed to me is public safety, and controlling speed controls the possibility of a serious accident over there, which regardless of, you know, the bottom line is you don't want anybody to get hurt. So I'm going to suggest or make a motion that we table this in favor of a speed study.
Second that.
The motion before us is to table with a second. Any further discussion?
Yes. Is there any reason that we need to table it? There's not a time frame that happens if we deny it, that it's brought back, is it? It's not like a zoning change. It's not like, Clint, I'm looking to you.
I think you have a couple of options. I think you're absolutely correct. If you were to vote the ordinance down, the ordinance could be brought at any time. If you table it, to a date not certain, that would allow for, Don and his staff to, do some speed stuff and come back with you, and at that point in time, I would imagine that, if that came back on the agenda, you'd go down and you'd provide notification to the folks that have spoken to the issue, and you'd put it back on the agenda and continue the discussion. So I think there's a couple of options available to you.
I think,
With that being said, I would amend my request to table it to a date not certain.
You didn't have a date anyway.
Oh,
You just had a motion to table, so that's all.
I think
That's
your
fine.
original motion was
What
not.
we get.
Fine.
so the motion before us is to table with a second, which does require us to vote. So please vote.
Voting in favor of the motion to table, council members Granquist, Merrill, Clausen, Jackson, Fowles, File. Voting against the motion, Councilman Langy, Councilman Murin, absent. Motion carries.
Okay. Moving on to item number 29, for a motion to consider approval of ordinance number 5461, annexing a tract of land generally located in the southwest corner of the intersection of Highway 275 and 37th Street. And Dennis, we'll look to you to kick this off.
We have a request from a developer of this corner to,
You need a motion?
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance 5461.
Okay, thank you. Now, Dennis, sorry about that.
we have a request from a developer to annex approximately 55 acres on the southwest corner of 37th Street and 275. They're planning a development there that will be a mixed-use development, have some multifamily residential, some medical facilities on the corner. The developer is here. If he wants to expound on that, I'll give him an opportunity. I think it makes perfect sense for us to look at annexation of this area as we move forward. State law requires that annexation ordinances be passed at 3 separate meetings, so first reading only this evening, and with that, I'll let answer any questions and Mike an opportunity to speak.
Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, City Council people, I'm here to request the annexation of the southwest corner of 37th Street and Highway 275, and basically am here to answer any questions you may have on the 55 acres and anything, just to answer anything that you may have on it.
Could you give us a general description of,
Sure,
of what you have in mind?
Yeah, basically on the 55 acres, what we're looking at is 250 apartment units with a clubhouse, swimming pool, a continuum of care that would include assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing, so that we could have a total continuum of care so that a family wouldn't be separated because of their needs, that on this campus that they could continue through that. And then also on the frontage on 275, basically medical office property there, pretty much in 3 different components, and we're excited about it. You know, there hasn't been any apartments built in Norfolk for 20 years, and I think the big question is you know, what the rental rates will be. Can they support can they support new construction in Norfolk? And so we know the need is there. We've had studies done on the apartments. We've had them done on the continuum of care. And also this would be a development that would have local ownership component through all of it. There'll be people that you'll all know.
Mike, should this all move forward according to plan, I assume there would be phases to this project. Can you talk a little bit about what comes first?
Great question, Josh. Basically, what we're looking at, we want to come out of the ground with the assisted living, memory care, apartments, and a medical office building at the same time. And that would basically be, if we can get in the ground sometime late summer, that's what we'd like to do. To answer your question on the phases, the apartments are going to be, we want to build 80 units to start with and let the market speak to us. You know, we don't know what type of units we should have in there to what clientele is least served in Norfolk. So we want to go in and put 80 units in. If the 80 are successful, we'll just go boom, boom, boom. We'd like to build out the whole facility as quickly as we can.
Excuse me, did you say 8 or 80?
80, I'm
80,
sorry.
okay.
80
I
units.
thought so, but.
Usually kind of an economy of scale on apartments is 80 is kind of a, and so that's what we're looking at. And we would do that. We're looking at doing the apartments maybe in 2 phases. And so we would bring in the clubhouse and the pool at the end of the first phase. I'm trying to think of anything else I can tell you about it. For us, the blight is a huge deal for a couple reasons. You know, we just went through the deal before of the wellhead protection there. Our property's really pretty low, and we're pretty close to the well field. And so we've calculated that it's going to take us probably 2 foot of fill on the 55 acres. That's a big ticket item. And and especially the apartments, boy, I don't know that any apartments are going to get built by developers if they don't have the TIF attached to it. It's that tight a market. And I think that really answers why there haven't been any apartments built in Norfolk for 20 years is because, the cost to build in Lincoln, Omaha, and Norfolk, pretty much about the same, but the rental discrepancy is huge between the communities. So we're not looking at it as a big money maker. We're looking at it as it is a need of the community. It's something that Norfolk really needs to address to grow. And, I was born and raised here, and we're developers in Phoenix is what we do. And it's going to take a project of this size and scope, I believe, to get the apartments launched in Norfolk.
Well, our recently finished housing study did certainly indicate a desperate need for new apartment units in our community.
It's funny also, since we did the press release last Thursday that came out in your packet, boy, I've got a lot of calls, and they've been coming from outstate. They've been coming from Omaha and Lincoln, wanting to know on the dirt we have. I think maybe because OTC's project has made people aware of, a little bit more aware of the need, and we want to do this with local people that you guys will all know, and we want to make this project as community-based as possible. One other thing I'd like to tell you is this, that we develop in Phoenix, and we develop a lot of projects there, a lot of mixed-use developments. And I know you guys' phone rings, and usually when it rings, it's people with, they're airing complaints on things. I don't know if you know how good you have it here. You've got a very special group of people. The feedback that we've got from Shane and Dennis has been great. It's the type of feedback we can't get in Phoenix. We can't get a call returned in the same day. Sometimes it's a couple weeks. So I know you're here to the other side, but I'm here to tell you that what you've got here is very special.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I think this type of mixed-use project is something we'll see more and more of in the future. Appreciate your vision on that. Anyone else wanting to discuss this matter, address this matter?
My name's Andrea McHenry, speaking on behalf of Warren Garage Door. We own the property just to the south of the proposed annexation.
Over the years that we've been out there, and you addressed it yourself, bringing in fill to raise that land up. That is a very low-lying piece of land. When we built our building, we brought it up. Over the years, there's drainage issues. My question, our concern would be, how are some of those things being addressed as part of this plan? Obviously, raising that property up, that water has to go somewhere, ideally down towards the river, but some of those things, and don't get us wrong, we're all for development. We'd love to see more businesses come out there. Just feel like some of those things, the drainage is a huge concern. We don't want water coming into our building. We work hard to try and keep our things nice. We don't want that to be an issue. The road is in very poor condition, so to bring something of this scale with that much traffic, I feel like that's something that needs to be addressed as well as part of this project.
When I think to try and alleviate some of your concerns that way is that that's all items that that guy over there, along with his staff, have to address in that. And I think the developer is well aware of that. He's not going to want to develop a piece of property that has that kind of intensity without decent roads and without decent drainage. So I think what we're seeing is something that, yeah, I mean, that's how those things happen in larger cities. So I think the annexation of this area is very appropriate. I've been in town for over 40 years and have always said that we were going to grow to that area and that's going to happen. And I think we're at the threshold of it right now, so.
Sure.
We are at the first round of this, considering annexation, but I think it's a fair question. Have we had some of those discussions? Maybe staff can talk to this, or Mike can, about drainage specifically and the road.
Yes, we really appreciate what Warren Garage Doors said. We look at them that they'll be a very good neighbor. We've had wetland study done, and the wetland study says that we have to run the water down 37th Street from the north to the south, and on the west side of our property, we also have to run it straight down there. So basically, the idea is that is the basic plan. Dennis, is that pretty much what the...
Yes, I mean, those are things that'll be looked at. At this point, a lot of the discussions have been about conceptual things. They haven't got into the detailed engineering yet of the site drainage. They've got some water features that may be helpful in helping with combination of aesthetics and also help with the runoff issues. We've got some heavy lifting to do yet with Mike and his team as far as, what's actually gonna be in the redevelopment plan, as far as the utilities needed, the streets and those things. It's been mentioned that, we're hoping that the TIF will be able to help defray the cost of working on 37th Street, as well as maybe some help with, getting, the sewer to that area. Just a meeting or two ago, we approved an engineering contract to move the sewer closer to the site, which is under design, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
They're working with Olson and Associates, which, we've got a good working relationship with on lots of other projects, so I think that, we will have a successful, outcome. Appreciate, the Warren's, comments, and that, those are things that we'll keep in our mind as we move forward. So.
Okay. And as the process moves forward, as I hear you say, Dennis, these are things that detail upon detail will be added to as we continue. So, any further discussion among the council? If not, short title, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to annex to said city a part of the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 19, and part of the northwest quarter of the northwest quarter, and part of the north half of the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter, all of Section 29, and part of the northeast quarter of the northeast quarter, and part of the north half of the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter, all of Section 30, all in Township 24 North, Range 1 west of the 6th principal meridian, Madison County, Nebraska.
Okay, with that said, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance 5461 carries on first reading only.
Item 30, I'd look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5462, amending section 24-293 of the City Code to add St. John's Lutheran Church, 1300 West Benjamin Avenue, to the list of locations that can be enforced under section 24-292 of City Code.
I'll make the motion, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, Captain Miller, we look to you again.
Mayor and City Council, Section 24-292 is the ordinance that talks about restricting people from driving through private parking lots without stopping to do business. The City Police Department received a letter from the pastor at St. John's Church requesting to be added to the list of 24-293, which is the list that's enforceable under 292. It's a fairly simple process as far as we're concerned, but they have to be on that list for us to enforce it. They made the request, and if approved, we'll add them and enforce it accordingly.
Any questions?
Just a small one, because it deals always with commercial stuff up until this point, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong on that. So what's considered doing business with the church?
Well, you have to,
You gotta pray or
you have to
not?
stop. What's that?
Do you have to pray or not?
Be a good idea. You have to, it's just, and just stopping at that business
Yeah.
for, versus cutting through to Highway 81.
And to be real honest, I drive 13th Street quite often, and I'm absolutely surprised that this hasn't come up before that, because there are a tremendous amount of vehicles that, if they see the light on Benjamin Avenue, that suddenly decide that they needed to make a right-hand turn.
Sure,
And
and cut through.
simply amazing.
Okay, thank you, Captain.
Right.
Discussion? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thank
Please
you.
come forward.
Yeah, I'm the property committee chairman at St. John's, Dennis Brosh. I sign in, is that what the deal is?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the situation we have at St. John's, I called into the police department here not too long ago and asked them what our liability was for people cutting through our parking lot. We have probably, I would say, in the morning when I'm at prayer breakfast with our rest of the guys, I count like maybe 12 to 15 cars cutting through our parking lot, missing the stoplight on Benjamin and 13th Street. So basically, my worry was, what is our liability for somebody having an accident, running over a pedestrian, something like that? So basically, we need to have signs, and I don't know, does the police department have signs?
We'll help you design them, but it'll be your responsibility to put them on.
Okay.
We'll help you design the proper wording so that it meets the ordinance.
Okay, so that's what we need, and we have people coming through there sometimes awful fast. I know we have our dumpsters there for paper and stuff like that, and I know they come in there to leave their paper, but there's a lot of people that are just cutting through just to get away from stopping or whatever at 13th and Benjamin. So we would like to have that ordinance put in place so we can, and then have the moderate from time to time to have people that are breaking the law there to be fined. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I got a question, I guess. Does that, I don't know if, Denny, if you guys have the problem, does that count for semis that might park there or stay overnight also, or how does that?
That would apply.
What's that? That would apply also? Okay. Just curious. And I know we had a special presentation today, but Denny's son Eric played on the '87 team when they won. Anybody knew that?
Very good.
They didn't do that back then, I don't think.
Any further discussion? If not, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 24-293 of the official city code to add an address for enforcement action related to driving or turning on public or private property, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5462 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5462 on second and third.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay, if no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5462 carries on second and third.
Item 31, for a motion to consider approval of a real estate purchase agreement between the City of Norfolk and Andrew and Brooke Sherbeck for the sale of the property located at 1004 Kenningstein Avenue for $12,250.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, Lyle?
Filling up some sheets here. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yep, this is a purchase agreement for the 1004 Kenningstein Avenue lot that the city's been in possession of for the past few years. Long story short, there was a house on there that burned down. City ended up taking possession. Everything was good to go. Had the bid opening on March 9th, the afternoon of. We had 4 submissions for it, ranging from $1,000, just $1,007, to the high bid of $12,250. I highly encourage you to accept this offer. If you do so, then next council meeting in April, there will be a sale ordinance that you'll see at that point. Be glad to answer any questions you have.
It was a pretty quick turnaround. Any questions for Lyle? Okay, if not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
All right, and we conclude with a designated public comment period. If there is anyone out there among you that would like to say anything, now's the time to do it. I don't see anyone. That concludes this meeting of the Norfolk City Council. Thank you.
See you, waited him out.